Roxy,
Here.
Sal, Santa Maria, Sal, are you on?
I think he is. I saw.
I saw his name.
Okay. Frank Treglia,
Here.
thanks, Frank. Jennifer Nolan, Matthew Van Ormer,
Here.
Sarah Ethier.
Here.
Okay. The purpose of this special meeting is to review and have discussion regarding the options for high school graduation. I would just like to make note that we do not have to take action on this today. We do have another special meeting set up if needed. So I just wanted to remind the board members about that. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Koss, who will give us, again, an overview of the graduation options.
Thank you. Stacy, if you could move to the next slide.
Oh. Shall we say the Pledge of Allegiance quickly? I pledge allegiance
To the flag
Flag of
to
the
the United States of America and to the republic for
for
which
which
it
it
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Okay, so we have there are two documents that were given to board members for this afternoon's meeting. One is the 4 proposed options that were in a letter that I sent to the Department of the Torrington Area Health District, which is an arm of the Department of Health in the state of Connecticut. And the second document is the response to that letter. So if we could go to the next slide, Stacy. In my letter, I outlined 4 options for the Department of Health to review. Of these options, one was not an option that was presented to board members when Mr. Perucci first presented his options. That would be option 3. The reason option 3 was developed was because of the feedback I was receiving in a phone call prior to my letter to the Department of Health regarding option 2. So we were looking for an alternative to option 2. So the 4 options you have before you go from a purely virtual ceremony to an in-person ceremony, but in-person is in quotation marks because we would remain in our cars and each student would be called one at a time to come up from their car and take their diploma. So we go from the least level of contagion to the most level of contagion in that order. All 4 of these options were presented to the Department of Health, the local Torrington area district, and we received feedback. Would you, Stacy, move to the next slide? So the written response to the 4 is on the slide that follows. I've highlighted the most important text of his response, of Director Rubo's response. First off, option 1, he states would pose the least health risk, obviously, because it would be a fully virtual ceremony, no contact or congregation at all. The second option he doesn't recommend because it would involve bringing students indoors, even though it would be by appointment and one at a time. The CDC holds that COVID-19 could, those germs, the particles could remain suspended in the air, and it would be very difficult for us to disinfect air. Option 3, he said, would eliminate the inside option that I just talked about in option 2, but we would still have to make sure that any surfaces that are touched are disinfected between each student appointment. And then option 4, He said it's approvable with stipulations, and those stipulations he did not outline in this letter. However, if option 4 were to be considered, we would get that list of stipulations and take action on them. He's saying that also his concern is that consideration should be taken as to how to regulate people that are staying in their vehicles. In other words, how do we keep people following the rules during option 4? So at this time, based on the information that I have from the Department of Health, I, as an advisor to the board, have to limit liability and risk, and I have to protect students. So I would be making the option 1 virtual ceremony the option that I am advising the board to take. However, if the board were to choose any of the other options that are provided there, I would be working in conjunction with Department of Public Health and with Mr. Perucci and his staff to be certain that we follow any recommendations and stipulations that are put upon us so that we can limit liability and limit contagion and safety with any one of those other options. Please understand that it is my job as the superintendent to offer you advice that I feel is sound. The most sound option is obviously option 1. We would have to work very closely with the Department of Health and get many reassurances from students and parents that they will follow whatever rules we put into place for any of the other options. I also want to point out at this time that Mr. Perucci, I'm looking down at my notes so that I can pull up an email, that Mr. Perucci and I, as well as the board chair, and later, earlier this morning, I forwarded it to the entire board, received an email from 2 students, one, the class of 2020 president, and the other, the student council president, both members of the class of 2020. And it was a very well thought out and well worded email that I'd like to share with you now, speaking about these options. As the presidents of the class of 2020 and the THS Student Council, we are reaching out to you on behalf of the senior class. We understand that per state and health district guidelines, the live audience graduation ceremony has been prohibited. We are also aware that a special meeting of the Board of Education has been called, and they indicate tomorrow at 4 because of the date of their email, to discuss the further options. We understand that dealing with the end of the year activities has been a rapidly evolving situation. However, we are extremely disappointed in the lack of direct communication between administration and the senior class. With this in mind, we want to ensure that when this meeting convenes, there is no misunderstanding regarding our hopes for our graduation. We have seen plenty of innovative graduation ceremony ideas in the news and social media, ensuring a memorable experience during this difficult time. An idea has been proposed and that the senior class finds most appealing. That's the parking lot graduation, or option 4 in the 4 options that are on the screen before you. Larger schools have had drive-in graduations and limited students to 1 carload per family. This is what the senior class is requesting. They're asking that we would propose also a parade through downtown immediately following the ceremony. In my response to our 2 officers of the senior class, I told them that that was already in the works, regardless of the option we choose. There is no way for us to put other way for us to put this other than to say that a virtual graduation would be the greatest disappointment to our education experience in Thomaston. We respectfully request that this letter be shared with all members of the Board of Education in advance of tomorrow's meeting. We are both available to address the board at the meeting if requested. I replied, and they understood, or at least I explained to them that there was no public comment at this meeting. However, I did assure them that I would share their email, and so I did. So again, to summarize, I would be, based on what my responsibilities are to the Board of Education, recommending option 1. However, the purpose of this meeting is to decide which one of these options works for us. So I would be working in conjunction with the Department of Public Health and Mr. Perucci and his staff to assure that no matter what option is chosen, we would be following the stipulations, regulations, and any other recommendations imposed upon us to limit the contagion, limit liability, and to control any incidental congregation that any one of these options might propose. Thank you.
You- Your audio's off.
Muted, Beth.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Because Francine gave us a presentation, we don't have to have a motion on the table per se. If the board has questions that they would like to ask her or Mr. Perucci regarding our options.
You know, this is Sal. Right off the bat, I don't like option one at all. I agree with the students that it's the least appealing from a personal point of view for the affiliation with the school and graduation. My opinion is that option 4 is by far the best option. It also has the advantage where, you know, if people want to have their family come along, they can stay in the same car, because if they're living at home together, that solves that quarantine issue with family meeting up with the student. And actually, I'm going to put out right now, I'm going to make a motion that we approve option 4 for graduation.
Do we have a second?
Matt Van Ormer, second.
Is there discussion on the motion?
This is Dave Calavecchio. Thank you, Superintendent Cost, for putting together this presentation today. And I'm also in favor of number 4, option number 4. But I want all the parents to know that are listening right now, that the Board of Education members and the administrators are personally liable for this graduation. So we definitely need every student, parent, family to go by the rules. I mean, and they're not pleasant. It's awful, and we do care about your kids, but we're taking a hell of a risk if we approve number 4, personally. So I just want them to keep that in mind if this motion passes. Thank you.
This is Heather. Francine, is there some kind of waiver that the parents can sign to kind of cover, so to speak?
There would be several things that would have to happen in speaking with the Department of Health. One of the things that parents would have to check off would be a list from the Department of Health where they would indicate if there was any exposure or recent contagion of COVID in the household or with anyone that would be in that vehicle that would be coming to the graduation ceremony. That would be something that would have to be signed off on in order to participate in the ceremony based on the answers to the questions. The other would be whatever the lists of rules and regulations, or recommendations, stipulations, whatever are put upon us as an entity in order for us to minimize contagion based on what the Department of Public Health says, we would be putting into a waiver document that would have to be signed off by each parent or guardian for the students to participate, so that it's clear that the rules that we've put out for behavior during this ceremony have been, that parents have been given proper notice, students have been given proper notice, and that we have proof that they have actually read them. So that would be another layer of stipulation that would serve as a waiver. And then there'll be other reminders throughout the process if there's a change in status based on the level of restrictions that are put upon us. Notices would be put out about that. But yes, at the most basic level, there would be 2 documents at a minimum, one from the Department of Public Health and one from Thomaston Public Schools, both of which would have to be signed off on in a very particular way that would inform us that we have done our due diligence and that no one who's attending our graduation ceremony would be exposed recently to COVID-19.
And also, can I ask Mr. Perucci if this is the option he prefers?
Sure. I think each option has merit associated with it. Obviously, option one is the least risky to all of us. So I would understand if the board decided to move in that direction. I also see merits in the others. It depends on the level of risk we want to take. Do I believe that we could pull this off regardless of which one that you select? Yeah, and I think we could do it safely. But we will have to have cooperation from the parents and the audience who are attending. And that's a variable. But again, we could have a police presence there. We'll have staff who are there directing traffic and guiding the cars in and out. So I think we could pull it off, and I think we could do it safely. But obviously, Ms. Koss is correct. If you want to eliminate the liability, it's option one. It's a no-brainer option one in that case. But if you vote for option four, then you're obviously taking a measured risk. I think that's the best I can provide.
Do we know what other towns are doing? Have we?
Yes. I could speak to that. I had a meeting with the Berkshire League principals, and all Berkshire League schools are doing some variation of number four.
Most of the districts are doing it with a drive-by scenario where they're not parking. So the congregation factor is diminished because it would be simply a drive-through graduation. In option four, we were seeking to have more of an organized graduation with more of what we would have expected if it was a traditional graduation. And we do have a smaller class than some of the districts that are choosing to do the drive-through graduation, because it may take, I think it was a time issue really for them. They had very large classes. We have the ability to get 60 vehicles in the back area.
120.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so, and that is true statewide, but Berkshire League, just speaking of the Berkshire League, all of the principals informed me that they were doing some version of the parking lot, whether it be the Goshen Fairgrounds, whether it be the racetrack up in Lyme. They're all doing a form of a parking lot, a variation of number four.
Similarly, to branch out a little further, West Hartford is doing more of a drive-in theater situation. A couple of the other regional school districts that are more south of us are doing a similar drive-in or drive-through. So it seems to be the trend in the state as to what is acceptable. And anything we choose has to be run by our local health district. So that's why these four options were brought to them, to the health district first, to decide whether or not something is even, completely off the table. So nothing that's before you is completely off the table. Nothing is stamped as denied. But each of them has their own, other than option one, each of them has their own stipulation that he commented on that we would have to follow up and follow through with.
But I think you brought up a good point though, Francine, is that even with the drive-through I think is more specific because you have huge number of students graduating. I mean, how many students are graduating this year, just out of curiosity? And it's got to be in the 60 range?
Yeah, about 60.
So you're talking 60 cars in the size of that parking lot. You could put those cars really far apart with 60 people.
Yes.
So that's why I know people are talking about the drive-through, but just with every scenario, certain features are designed for that situation. In our situation, we're talking 60 cars. So I really don't see the need for a drive-through situation to quote, keep things moving, so to speak. We've got plenty of space for 60 cars.
And that's, I believe, why I have to say, we didn't even put that on as an option, because we felt that it wasn't necessary, other than to control crowds or congregation, which if our students and our parents stick to the rules that we give them, which I believe they will.
I think so. And the two seniors that brought the letters forward, I'd like to see them actually help get involved in getting those letters distributed to the parents. I mean, besides, the school doing it too, they initiate the letters to get option 4. And, what part of that stuff is, I think they should own up to doing some of the groundwork to get all the letters signed and whatever is required by the group.
They responded quickly to me this morning. Again, they did a fine job of responding. One of my requests of them was that no matter what the outcome is tonight, or ultimately if it has to be postponed to another day for the decision to be made by the board, that they offer supportive communication so that we're all on the same page, whatever the outcome is.
Right.
So that we're all together working on this from the same position of wanting to see it succeed. Because one of the saddest things that could happen is that if there is a breaking of the rule to the point where we have a congregation of people, we would have to end the ceremony abruptly. And that's not something that either Mr. Prucci or I are interested in doing. We're also not interested in having law enforcement speak on our behalf, hence why we're going to have staff there, hoping that we can mitigate before we would need to evacuate. So if we can get the 60 students and their families on board, if we can get the stipulations in order, which could be many, but they would have to be tolerated and abided by, then I agree with Mr. Carucci that any option here would work.
I assume that we're capable of doing it, but if we go with option 4, can we still live stream that on something for, the people that don't fit in the car?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the plan.
Perfect.
But we are the plan that we put together initially, but the parking lot allows for over 120 cars to be spaced out adequately for entry and exit to be done adequately and safely. So Sal is correct in that, if we offered 2 cars per parent, we can, or two cars per student, we can adequately maintain the safety in there. Again, as long as people cooperate.
And I want to add the emphasis of as long as the Department of Health says that
Allows
that's
that.
the way.
Yep.
So
Yep.
we may have an intention of having 120 cars and they may say, no, 1 car per
Absolutely.
family. We have to abide by that. So
Absolutely.
whatever option we choose has to be morphed
Yeah,
into
meet the
whatever the
stipulations.
Department of Health says it has to be morphed into.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any other questions or discussion, comments? Okay. I think for this motion, we'll do a roll call vote. So we can get individuals' answers for this. So we'll start with Dave,
Aye.
Roxy,
No.
Heather,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Sal,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Jen is not on. Frank,
Frank is going to abstain as a parent of a senior.
My vote today is no, as I wasn't planning on, I was hoping that we would have a little more time to think about the options as a board. So for today's meeting, I'm going to vote no. But the motion carries. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Dave Calvec will make a motion to adjourn.
Matt Van Ormer, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the work, everyone.